Welcome to 2E ADHD. I'm Joel, and I talk about what life is like with the two opposing forces of autism and ADHD running around in your brain, and how having a high IQ complicates all that. Tonight, I want to talk about where I am in the diagnosed, understanding, figuring things out. So going back to the ancient beginnings, when I was most of the way through first grade in literally a two-room schoolhouse. I attended two of them in northern Wisconsin, for second, third in one room, fourth, fifth, sixth in the other room, two teachers and about 30 kids in each room. So I was in first grade and they discovered that I was finishing all of my work in about 3 minutes. And then I had a half an hour to sit and do nothing. So eventually they did a bunch of psychological evaluation and the principal decided that they would just put me in second grade. So I started in first grade, finished second grade. I'll tell you what, it was still very, very boring. The work in school didn't get challenging until my senior year when I started taking calculus. That's a future video. So at that point, well, even before that, backing up further, taught myself to read when I was 4 because my older brother went to school and I was home alone with just my mom and a baby that didn't do anything and a house full of books. We didn't own a TV at the time. Northern Wisconsin, early 60s, and my dad. But all these indications of high IQ, but then I spent the next 35 years after second grade trying to figure out why things that were so hard for other people, math, science, languages, came so easily to me, but they could pick up a phone and call the theater to find out when the movie was playing. Yes, kids, we used to do that. There was no internet, don't ask. Just having a conversation with people, sitting in a restaurant where music was playing and trying to eat at the same time. Things that were so easy for other people were just impossible for me. And as a kid, it got dealt with by people telling me to knock it off and behave. And other places I got made fun of and bullied. And then in life, I struggled to make a living ever because when you either focus too hard or jump around from one project to another, you don't fit into the business world. I eventually found someone who really knew what I could do with web design, hired me for a startup company funded by one of the founders of Microsoft. And before they burned through $52 million and shut down, I made a really good living for 2 years. Other than that, I've been everything from a janitor to a construction worker to the head of accounting to the primary web developer. And when I started running my own web development company in 1999, I'd already been doing web work before then. That's when I really started having fun with work, but I've never really made a good living at it. And I'm realizing now that how my brain works has a lot to do with that. So one long and painful marriage with someone I didn't understand who didn't understand me, and then a second marriage with someone who really tries hard to understand, who loves me deeply and is willing to make sacrifices to make our life good, and a daughter who we never thought of as strange because she's just like her dad. How strange can she be? So, when she was about 20 years old, when we were absolutely convinced that her sensory issues that she was diagnosed with 5 years before that were autism, and she was diagnosed, and it was autism. And 2 months after that, I said, well, if you and I are so much alike and you're autistic, and she just looked at me and she said, you think? It took me another 8 or 10 months to really accept that if she's autistic and we're almost carbon copies, I'm autistic. So then I finally started talking to my primary care physician, who is really good, and she manages all my health stuff. I have so much going on, long COVID and other health issues. I have so many specialists. I have all the ologists. And so I went for, well, a year and a half ago, I went in for a psych eval, because they wanted to see how much of my brain damage was from aging and how much of it was from COVID. 6 years ago this month, COVID wrecked my health. And they decided it's all COVID. And they gave me basically, the psychiatrist said, your IQ is so high. By the way, we did a full IQ workup. Because I figured the other tests would be so easy for you, I wanted to actually spend the time on this because we had it. He said, no one else is even going to notice your cognitive deficits, but to you, because of where you are intellectually, they will feel huge. But he said, there's really nothing anyone else can do to get your word finding and speech challenges and language challenges, because that's where it showed up, better than they are, other than you just continuing to train yourself. Because he said, you're right now damaged. You're better than most people at language. So he said, play Scrabble on Saturday night, engage in word games. And he said, that will train your brain and you'll be in charge of it. And you will do it because it's fun and it's all the growth you need. So I've been doing that faithfully every single day. My wife and I play word games together every day. We play word games as a family, and that and teaching myself classical orchestration has really gotten my brain back. As you can tell, I can speak in complete sentences, which for a short period, I literally could not. I said words that were around the subject. My wife interpreted what I needed and helped me. That was the point at which I totally stopped coding. I've built a few websites over the last 4 years, but I retired because I couldn't think. I couldn't make a sentence and I couldn't code. So when I went for the autism diagnosis, have not yet heard back on our referral for the ADHD diagnosis, but we're going to do one thing at a time. The autism diagnosis, the whole process, I had a phone call with a psychiatrist, only time I spoke to him. The actual testing is done by a psych student with a master's who's working on their PhD. But in the phone call with him, I said, how will my 6.5 decades of masking affect the testing? And he said, oh, we'll see right through it. And I have enormous respect for the medical profession. I'm the person that when the doctor says do this, I do it. Unless I really think they misunderstood, in which case I'll find another doctor. But I trust medical professionals. I believe in science. And when I got this test back, to me, it literally read like a medical professional's version of, you don't look autistic to me. There were so many inconsistencies in how I answered the questions, so many things that looked more, to me, having been aware of it going through the testing, that looked like flaws in how the test was administered. One example, when my daughter got her autism diagnosis, the personal assessment inventory, which weighs pretty heavily, she did it on a computer where you got one question at a time. You answered the question, new screen, one at a time, and you just sat there and you could take a break when you wanted. And she was in a private room, her mom on the other side of the table, doing the same assessment on her behalf so that they could compare the two. And after all of the other testing, the psych student led us out to the lobby and she said, "Oh, can you fill this out?" I thought it was a client satisfaction survey or something. It was a 344 question questionnaire, a little plastic booklet, slippery plastic booklet, and 344 answer slots in the waiting area with children playing and two receptionists answering the ringing phones. And I'm sitting in a waiting room chair, which are designed to lounge back and be comfortable for 20 minutes, balancing a plastic slippery booklet on one arm of the chair and the legal-sized answer sheet on a letter-sized clipboard, which of all of the things that went on, that's what freaked me out the most. But then the questions or the statements, I don't remember exactly how they all are, but everything about it is about actions, not really about feelings, and they're all stated in the present tense. And nobody said anything about getting outside input. When you're an adult looking for a diagnosis, apparently they don't want to talk to your mom or your siblings or your wife who's known you since you were 14 years old. So I filled this thing out and sometimes I would think to answer it how I thought and felt when I was 14, but most of the time I was answering these questions about my actions as they are now. But my actions as they are now do not match my thoughts and feelings as they have ever been. So a bunch of the questions were answered like I truly felt when I was a kid, autistically, but a lot of them were answered how I behave now as a very, very efficiently masking autistic adult. And that was reflected in the comments that he made, but he diagnosed me with OCD and depression and other things, but said not autistic, despite the first comment in the first paragraph was, patient was socially awkward. So now we're giving it a rest. Well, I got that diagnosis and spent 24 hours in a really deep, dark black hole. And my wife said, I know it's not what you're expecting, but let's figure out where we go from here. Well, our daughter, our autistic daughter, came home from a trip the next night, and I said, got the report. And she said, yeah, knowing what it was going to be. And I said, he says I'm not autistic. And she laughed and laughed, and then she realized I was serious. She said, if you're not autistic, I'm not autistic. And I know I'm autistic. And so my wife and I both thought about it. And 24 hours later, my wife, who is really my sanity check in everything, thank you, Sue, she said, you know, the more I think about what Fiona said last night, yeah, that diagnosis just doesn't sound like you. I see you, I see Fiona, you guys are the same. And everything we've learned about autism and ADHD since you diagnosed yourself a couple months ago, it's you. It's you in every way. So I have new insurance as of the beginning of this year. I'm filming this in January of 2026. So the beginning of the year, new insurance. And once we get a few other things settled, we're going to try once more, try for a diagnosis, and then eventually get an ADHD diagnosis. But this is not a hill I plan to die on. I really wanted the diagnosis to validate my self-diagnosis, but I've realized since I got that, what I believe is a misdiagnosis, and how after the initial shock was over, how I reacted and how absolutely I feel that it's wrong. I know who I am and how I am and what I am. The need for validation has dropped off somewhat. My wife absolutely believes that I'm autistic and have ADHD. My daughter, who's autistic, believes the same thing. And the friends that I've talked to, some of whom have ADHD and have family members who are autistic, they all say none of them have doubted it at all. They've all said, yeah, makes perfect sense. So I would like to pursue a diagnosis for both halves of the ADHD, but if it doesn't work out, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pursuing it. The only benefit I get living in the United States, where there's no extra accommodations of any kind for an adult diagnosed with either of those conditions, the only benefit is the validation, and I feel like I validated myself. So that's where I am now, and I would love to hear where you are. Are you autistic? Do you have ADHD? Are you ADHD? Do you have an exceptionally high IQ? Which of those things were you diagnosed with? Which ones have you diagnosed yourself? Which, trust me, I will believe. As most people say, nobody goes looking for an autism diagnosis because they want to find out they're not autistic. So I'd love to hear about what your experience has been, and if you have if this has raised any questions in your mind, drop them down below, because I love talking about this stuff. And in the next video, I want to talk about some resources that I've found, and go down I think the next video will probably be about the curse of being the smartest kid in the room and what damage that has done to me over the last 66 years. So I'm Joel. This is 2E ADHD, and I hope to see you next time.